Hi, Ray Poynter here, and let's get started with Insights 2021. So here's the plan of action. I'm going to start with the context today, what is happening, and then I'm going to move on to look at topics like what is hot, key developments, challenges and threats, before finishing with some tips for transitioning from 2020 to 2021 and thoughts about going beyond that too. And then we'll take Q&A. So the research context. Research is not an island. We need to think about what is happening in society, in culture, in the business, in the economy. And the phrase that the scenario planners use these days is tuna, turbulent, uncertain, novel and ambiguous. And that describes the situation today. A lot of people are saying the word unprecedented is being overused. No, it isn't. If you were not running a business in 1939, 1945, you have never run a business when the times are this unpredictable, when things are as unclear as they are now. So the word unprecedented is absolutely relevant. We're in tuna times. So I'm going to have a quick look back at a webinar I did in May when I looked at the situation and I made some thoughts and some predictions, and we're going to look at scenarios. I'm going to talk a little bit about winners and losers, and then I'm going to share a sneak peek which was released at the ESOMAR Insights Festival last week, which is looking what is happening in the world of the buyers and the users of insights. So this comes from the webinar in May, where we looked at this really thought-provoking graphic from the Financial Times, which showed the global growth and then possibly the decline in the number of deaths from COVID around the world. And most expectations were, as shown by the dotted lines there, that it would continue to reduce. Because as humans, we have a tendency to think that the direction we're traveling in now is the direction we will keep traveling in. We are falling over all of the time thinking about straight lines. And often the world doesn't do that, and in particular, it's not doing that at the moment. Because this is what has happened today between May and September. Now who's going to make a prediction about what happens next? We certainly don't want a straight line projection now. But what these two charts show us is that the future is less predictable now than it usually is. Back in May, I suggested we had these four scenarios. The virus is controlled soon, and interplaying with that, the economy recovers soon, which means we get back to what we used to call normal. Or the virus is controlled soon and the economy does not recover soon. Well, that would be a major recession. It's the sort of world that we've got experience of. We can think back to 2008 and to previous recessions, so we would have something to guide us. Or the virus is not controlled soon, but the economy does recover. So we'd be back to some sort of normal, but there'd be a lot of deaths. This is the sort of scenario that some businesses have been pressing for, and it's the sort of scenario that a lot of the anti-mask, anti-lockdown protesters are campaigning for. Yes, we should accept more older and sicker people dying, but I want to get back on with my life, or if you're a businessman, I want to get back on with profits. Or the virus is not controlled soon and the economy does not recover. And that is a whole new world. None of us have operated in that process. In September 2020, these are still the four scenarios. If you are running a business, if you are leading insights in your organization, you need to think about all four of these scenarios. How are you going to operate in 2021 if one of those four comes about? You can hope for the best, but you should always plan for the worst. This is a really interesting graphic produced by McKinsey & Company, and they talked to senior people across a wide range of industries, talking about how things were going to change. And what we see is overwhelmingly the people running companies think that things like the meeting structure and cadence is going to change. How leaders do their leading day to day is going to change. Approach to talent and skills is going to change. New cultural aspirations, behaviors and mindsets, products and or service portfolios, partnerships and broader ecosystem, all of these are expected to change. And they would all massively benefit. Some of them absolutely need insights and research. We can't be talking about changing the cultural aspirations, behaviors and mindsets of an organization without having insights and research. We can't be changing the products and service portfolios without having insights and research. Which brings us to this key point. Insight is so necessary today because everybody is flying blind. Don't let people get away saying the word unprecedented is being overused, because then they will use it as an excuse for not doing the research. They must not trust their gut at the moment. They must validate their thoughts and investigate the best way forward. Now, a lot of the news is about the losers, about stores that are closing, but we should also recognize there have been massive winners. So the top one we should think about probably is Apple. 2 years ago, it became the first company in the world to be worth $1 trillion. Just this month, September 2020, it became the first company in the world to be worth $2 trillion. That is an amazing achievement. Apple is now worth more than the top 100 companies in the United Kingdom, the FTSE 100. Amazon and Microsoft are just behind Apple, 1.7 trillion and 1.6 trillion, numbers that we hadn't heard of before 2018. Walmart, online sales up 97%, but the same store's sales up 10%. It's doing incredibly well. Other winners that we're seeing really strong improvements, AMD, Nvidia from the technologies and chip making sectors, and of course Netflix. So there are absolutely winners going on at the same time as there are problems for others. So I mentioned this study that was released last week, or rather the sneak peek was released last week. The fieldwork is going on until the end of September. So this is very hot news. And this study is being conducted by ESOMAR and a wide range of partners. And those partners include the Insights Association from the United States, the ARF from the United States, the Research Society from Australia, and a really wide range of organizations. And I'm very glad to say Potentiate are also a partner in this project. One of the questions was how much of the research you do, and remember we're only talking to the buyers and users of research, there are no suppliers in this study, how much of the research is conducted internally or via suppliers? And almost 40% of research is being conducted internally. 62% is being conducted by suppliers. So the model is quite different to where it was a few years ago. We also asked about change. And in 42% of organizations, the internal share is increasing. We are very soon going to see a situation where 50% of the insights process is conducted using internal teams as managers, designers, actioneers, curators, and so on of the process. That is a major change, and we need to make sure that we're on board with that and we're facilitating it and utilizing it. Another message from this ESOMAR and Partners study is that the volume of work is up, but the resources are reduced. So we asked people the quantity of projects they expect to conduct next year in 2021, and about 60% expect to do an increase in projects. changes in budgets and resources this year, 41% are showing a reduction in the budgets and resources this year, but 22% are showing an increase. The change in budget resources next year, about 30% seeing a reduction on top of this year's reductions, and about 30% seeing an improvement in the resources. So what we can see there is going to be more work to do, but for many organizations, there is not going to be more money or more resources. Last week, ESOMAR published its Global Market Research Report. This is a study that's run every year which looks into a large number of factors about the industry, in particular turnover. And the estimate from around the world is that there is going to be a reduction in 2020 of about 25% in research and insight spending. That's a reduction of about $20 billion from something like 80 billion to 60 billion US dollars. That's a major change. But we need to be aware that that's not true for everybody. As we can see here, 22% of organizations are spending more this year than they were last year. So winners and losers, and we need to make sure that we take both of those into the picture. So how are people doing more with less? Because this doing more with less is a phrase I keep hearing. It came out in the recent GRIT study, it's come out of the ESOMAR research, and it's come out of research that the New MR organization has been doing. Over and over again, doing more with less. We have to do more work, but the resources are either the same or fewer. One of the things we're doing is we're seeing people using insight communities for a larger share of projects. They're blending self-serve with outsourcing. We're seeing organizations using survey engines themselves, the so-called DIY sector, things like SurveyMonkey. We're seeing a lot of automation of the process and people using AI as part of that automation to streamline services. One of the interesting examples I saw recently, and we are involved in Potentiate, is building text analytics into CX dashboards so you get more insight in less time. It's not fundamentally different. Most methods of using automating are taking things we're currently doing and they're just making them faster and easier and more complete. We're seeing more integration of projects with information being sourced from the whole organization. There is a desire to create dashboards and hubs that pull that information together. We're seeing more democratization of the process. People from all different aspects, multidisciplinary teams, all having an involvement in the insights process. Companies adopting lean and agile approaches to that. And increasingly, the first question that's being asked is, do we already have data that will answer that question? When money was easily available, it was often easier to do a new project. But now, with all the pressures that are on, it's often better to say, do we already have that answer buried somewhere in the information we've already got? So, first of all, before we move into the sort of the focusing on insights, the last bit really about the situation and the wider context. What is the world going to be like in 2021 and beyond? I think we can say about COVID-19 it's going to be better, or it's going to be worse, or it's going to be similar. In terms of having a vaccine, yes, we will have one, or no, we won't have one, or somewhere between the two. Now, what do I mean by somewhere between the two? Well, we could have a vaccine that was as effective as the polio vaccine and the smallpox vaccine, or we could have something more like the flu vaccine. So only about 50% of the population choose to have it. It has to be administered every year because the disease changes, and it's not 100% effective. So we don't know where we're going to be on those. The global economy is going to be in recession or recovering. The North American economy could differ from the global economy. The European economy could differ. The Australian economy could differ from the global economy. Are there going to be trade problems? Probably. China is a highly probable one. Brexit in the UK is another probable one, but we don't know where they're going to be or the scale of the impact. Are we going to have climate problems? Yeah, probable. We're seeing those increasingly frequently. Regulatory problems for big data. This is really quite probable. We're going to see Facebook and Google being challenged in a wide range of countries, including the United States. We're already seeing WeChat and TikTok being challenged. We're going to see a wide range of tightening of problems and issues around big data. For business, we have this expression of curate's egg, good in parts and bad in parts. Yeah, for cruise liners, airplane manufacturers, pop concerts, these sort of things, it's going to be terrible 2021. It might be as bad as 2020. Unlikely to be worse because they're barely trading. Amazon, Apple, online shopping, Netflix, etc. It's going to be a fantastic year. And then for the really big companies in the consumer fast-moving goods, Unilever, Coke, Procter & Gamble, it could be good, it could be bad, probably will be somewhere in between. And of course we could have other surprises. We could have ash clouds, wars, floods, fires, IT breakdown, terrorism, asteroids for heaven above. It always could happen. It usually doesn't happen. It probably won't happen next year, but remember, it could. So what's hot in this insights world? Well, the first thing we've got to talk about is digital qual. Now, digital qual is about 25 years old. I was certainly using it in the mid-90s, but it's come of age. The tools and the techniques have been getting better and better. The demand for qual has been going up year after year for the last few years because the more big data we have, the more we need qualitative insights. And now digital qual has taken off because face-to-face qual is so difficult or impossible, and the tools supporting it have become so much better. Agile. This has absolutely taken off, not because it's a big thing in market research, but because it's a big thing in business. Whole organizations are becoming more agile, and insights need to work with that process. Pretty much anything with X has become hot, and this has been a gradual process over the last few years, but usability, customer experience, the whole experience economy, and now human experience, focusing on people instead of products and interactions. Insights community as a default option. Communities are 20 years old. They entered the mainstream about 10 years ago. But instead of asking what research can we do with communities, which is where we were 10 years ago, it's now what can't we do with communities because they're a cheaper, faster, more agile option. And the answer is increasingly there is very little that we can't do with communities. Democratizing the insights, involving other parts of the organization, rather than saying, no, don't use that survey tool, rather than saying, no, don't go and do your own focus groups. The move is towards having an integrated picture where the insights teams are more like coaches and as inspiring leaders. We're seeing a lot of automation, and almost all the AI that's being usefully put, almost all the AI which is hot, is being used in helping create automation. Automation is the thing that is making the difference. And video. Yes, we've been using video for years, but the tools have got so much better. The ways of using video have got better. So we're seeing them being integrated with quantitative studies, obviously qualitative studies, making a real change to the way the voice of the customer is represented to the stakeholder. So what's not hot? Okay, first one's real easy. Anything face-to-face is not hot. But also most shiny new toys, augmented reality, neuroscience, biometrics, facial coding, year on year, these are accounting for a smaller share of the market research and insights pie than they were 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. Why is that happening? Well, firstly, they take longer. Secondly, they handle trickier problems. Most of the time, you need an agile solution to produce something quick to enable the business to move forward. Most of these are not well geared to doing that. So that is why most of these shiny toys are really not hot. Large-scale tracking studies have been in decline for years. We spend a fortune on them. They deliver relatively little value. They've got a lot of legacy implications. People's salaries and bonuses are often linked to them, but they're not helping the business drive things forward. Nor is traditional reporting. People don't want the 1 hour debrief. They don't want the 60 slide deck. They don't want a 20-page report. They want an answer to a question. They want to be able to ask a question and get an answer. They want to be able to grab a relevant statistic in order to be able to make a decision. So that traditional reporting has changed, and artificial intelligence and machine learning and natural language processing are actually not that hot, except when they're being used in automation and except when they're being used in augmented intelligence. Augmented intelligence is where it makes people more effective. So that's another sort of efficiency. AI, when it's driving efficiency, great. Almost every other aspect of AI is probably a distraction for you in 2020, 2021. What are the key developments that are going on in insights generation? Now, some of these I've mentioned, so I can skip over those quickly. A few of the others I'll go into more depth. Automation, including AI, is just part of that process, yes. The 360-degree view of the customer, the client or the citizen or the viewer, the human-centric approaches. This is a change which has happened generally in industry. If we think about design thinking, it starts with the people, doesn't start with the product. We've moved away from the product to the experience. The next step is really to focus on people. What do people need? How are people's lives affected? What is the culture? And then what can we do to help? Democratizing. So I've mentioned sharing the insights as snackable, accessible formats in the language of the people who want to use them. We're seeing a lot more integration, treating every project as a piece of the jigsaw rather than the whole picture. So we want the research to be agile, but then we want it to build together. And I'm hearing this phrase more and more: less research, more often. So it's picking up from approaches like lean and agile, iterative learning, multidisciplinary teams. So instead of doing a really big piece of research at the start of a project to find out what do people need and how are they going to use it, let's do really small tests frequently. Are we all in the right direction? Is this right? Let's involve the whole design and marketing team to make sure that we're all moving in the direction that works for the customer, being customer centric. And there is a really big shift towards measuring ROI of insights and showing the ROI of insights. And broadly, companies seem to fall into two categories, companies using insights. Category A are those who think it's not possible to measure and show the return on investment of insights. And category B are those companies who are doing it. There's some fantastic work being publicized by GRBN, a global network of research organizations, showing how you do it. And we're very happy to spend some time working with you if you would like to find out more about how to measure and show the ROI of insights. So what are the challenges and threats being faced by the insights industry, profession, process? The first one, of course, budgets and resource cuts. There is this whole issue of doing more with less, and less is going to be a problem. But actually, a lot of those cuts are a consequence of our reduced relevance. I implore you, establish the return on investment, answer real problems, answer solutions, and you will find that more budget and resources are available. There is a discussion to be had about whether this is connected with all of the pressures in society, the financial crisis and COVID, or whether it's quite separate. But there has been a recognition that we need to do more about diversity and inclusivity in insights. Obviously, the springboard for this has been Black Lives Matter, but it's brought together so many other aspects in business. So are we talking to the right people? Do we have a diverse and inclusive team looking at the insights? The answer is almost certainly not. So how can we make our team more inclusive so that we understand the lives of our customers, our users, our citizens and viewers better? The regulatory environment for data is going to get stricter and stricter. Just one example, and there are changes going on in Latin America, in North America, in Asia and in Europe, but this is one very interesting, potentially scary change. The European Union are proposing to legislate on artificial intelligence, and they mean anything that uses an algorithm. They are going to insist on checks and processes that are going to change the cost base of what we do, that will change the scope of what we do. What we saw with GDPR was legislation that gets passed by the EU is then adopted in North America. It's changed, but the basic idea is adopted. It's adopted in Latin America. It's adopted in Asia Pacific. So we are going to see more regulations around data, artificial intelligence, and these sort of areas. You need to stay informed, and you need to lobby with the trade bodies. Pretty much everybody is too small to do it on their own, so work with your trade bodies to lobby government to get the right sort of regulation. There's a saying about generals and wars that at the start of a new war, generals tend to use the tactics and strategies of the previous war. So in the First World War, the British generals took cavalry regiments and their horses over to France thinking that they would do cavalry charges. There is a real risk that in this changing world, the insights professionals are going to keep using the tools we were using 10 years ago and 20 years ago. We all agree, I'm sure, that stakeholders don't care about methods. They want reliable answers. We can't be focusing on things like significance testing, crosstabs and ranking scales. We're going to use them. We're experts. We're going to get them right. But we need the equivalent of the change that happened in Agile from waterfall to Agile. What is our minimal viable product in terms of answering the client's problem, answering the stakeholders' problems, getting there quickly? And the need for speed. This has been growing and growing and growing for years and years. Insights are on time or they are useless. Yes, they have to be affordable, but they're useless if they're not there on time. People are expecting things to move faster. We can't have a situation where the slowest part of the process is insights, because then insights will be bypassed. So how do we transition from 2020 to 2021 and beyond? We've really got to take this mantra of do more with less. So we want to blend self-service and service. We want to integrate solutions. We want to use existing research to deliver more. So communities as a hub I've mentioned. Use your CX program to measure trends. Look at longitudinal analysis of concept tests to improve the iterative process. Make better use of existing tools, focusing on speed, stakeholders' needs, and the requirements of customers as people. Don't think about what customers can I find for my products and services. Think about what products and services do my customers need. That is the orientation. That's a quote slightly mangled by me there from Seth Godin, and it's really relevant to today. Deliver value to the rest of the organization. So you need to collaborate to deliver Agile. There was a fantastic quote from the UK Insight Manager recently, and what she said was, if you do Agile on your own, it's like trying to row a boat with one oar. The Insights team can't be Agile on its own. We need to democratize the process. We need to think about this less research more often. Becoming iterative and brave. What do I mean by brave? Put a recommendation with the findings. So you might find there is a 60-40 chance that this product will be successful. You should accompany that with, so we recommend launching it, or so we recommend not launching it, because you are best placed to interpret what that 60-40 really means. You want to be the number one voice for the customer. Keep going back to the people, the human, the customer at the end of the process, and measure the ROI of your insights. Use automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, standardization to make your research more efficient. Really focus on faster, cheaper, easier. That is what we need to be doing for the next probably 2 to 3 years. Focus on tools and approaches that you can use and reuse. So avoid the shiny toys that you might only use once. If you get a request from a stakeholder to do something that's a real one-off, get an agency to do it. Don't even think about doing that in-house. What you want to be doing is all the stuff that is repeatable and that you can build a body of knowledge so that you can generate this faster, cheaper, easier. Develop lean approaches using multidisciplinary teams, less research more often, focusing on the human experience. And that will take you safely through any of those 4 scenarios that I was talking about earlier. This is how we see it at Potentiate. So you need to think of a hub or a dashboard or a way of thinking that combines all the different sorts of knowledge in your organization. These are not all housed in the insights department, but they need to be connected by somebody. Ideally, you will take the lead in connecting all of these pieces together. So have a look at all these slices of the pie and say, have we got them all? Because if we haven't, we should be putting them there. And how are we going to bring them together so we get this single view focused on the human experience? We want to understand people and culture, and then we want to understand how that interacts with us and how we can help people. And that will take you forward. So thank you very much, and I look forward to questions.